Wonderful. So great. Thank you for being here, everyone. As you may know, this press conference was rescheduled from last Thursday after the unexpected fire occurred in the Blue Zone and cancelled the on-the-site events on Thursday afternoon. However, it does allow us now a few days for reflection on post-COP events. My name is James Ellsmoor. I'm the CEO of Island Innovation. I'll be hosting, but I won't be talking too much. And the idea of today's discussion is to reflect on some of the outcomes from the COP itself, specifically how that relates to island nations, small island developing states, some subnational island jurisdictions. We will have four representatives from island institutions just to give some brief remarks, and then I will ask journalists who are here attending and also those who have pre-submitted questions to share any questions that they might have. So I'll go to each of our speakers. I will also be shortly joined by the Honorable Matthew Samuda, the Minister of Water, Environment and Climate Change from the Government of Jamaica. He'll be with us shortly, and we'll come back to him. I'll first go to Dr. Ronald Berkeley, who is the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Environment, Natural Resources and Climate Change at the government of the British Virgin Islands. So, Dr. Berkeley, over to you. Please share some of your reflections from COP30 as they relate to BVI. Oh, there we go. Oh, we can't hear you. There we go. Go ahead.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Okay.
can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. All right. Good morning. Good morning again. Thank you for this opportunity to be on this platform. It's we crave this kind of exposure, because there's so many opportunities that pass us by, when we are not at the table. So any opportunity we have to be at the table to make known to the region and literally the world what we are doing, we're quite grateful for that. Yes, my name is Dr. Ronald Berkeley, and I represent the government. I currently serve as the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Environment, Natural Resources and Climate Change. And the structure of the Trust Fund Board also placed me there as one of the ex officio members. Myself and the Financial Secretary sit on the board representing the government's side. That said, I think the COP went well for us. We went there with the intention of sensitizing, if you will, the region, the public, and indeed the world to the Climate Change Trust Fund. Even though there are some difficulties, if I might say, that small islands experience. For example, it's the Bibia is a very small place. At best, if you have 40,000 people, you have a lot. It's a very small place. So whilst we went to the COP and with a reasonably, given our population size, delegation, it's still limited in terms of all the contacts we can make, all the meetings that we can attend. So what we try to do is sort of split up, if you will. Somebody goes here, somebody goes there, and try to soak in, if you will, as much as we can. A part of the issues I think that we have also is that our reliance on our partners, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, But getting to COP means that we need to reach out to partners like the OECS and the 5Cs, and who have generously given us opportunities to be accredited under their umbrella, if you will, to get us into these important meetings. I think of another important issue that small islands, in our view, certainly in my view, that we have at COP, is the idea that I'm not sure if a lot of the big players believe us. And I say that believe us in terms of the impact of the climate change on small territories like ours. And I say that because I was engaged in a discussion maybe about a month ago, an international discussion. And these were persons from, across the planet. And I'm trying to raise the discussion, or at least try to focus the discussion in terms of what we as small island territories face, and coastal states, I guess, face. And they see this, we all lumped together, it's all climate change, and no, that's just, they don't really believe in that. But and then I can understand why they wouldn't, because if you have almost been blown to smithereens by a Category 7 hurricane, you would never understand. You would never understand. So having gone through Irma, and I'm sure when the minister comes on, he could speak from the Jamaica point of view. Having gone through Irma, you know that this stuff is real, right? And coming right out of Irma, I think the very year we had Irma is when our fund was established. Because as we were saying prior to coming on to the conference, is that small island states are somehow excluded from these finances that are available, and particularly overseas territories. And some say because of our political status and on and on, we're excluded. And nobody shy away, if you will, from telling us, yeah, there's some money here, but you're not this is not available to you. So we had to do something. And so we came up with the idea of the trust fund. It's now funded at the tune of $5.5 million. And we can talk about that more as we go along. We are in the process now of onboarding a CEO, getting office spaces and bringing in some of the critical staffing up front, and then hopefully over the next year and a half to completely
Thank
have a
you.
full complement of staff. So I will stop there and then allow others to come in, and hopefully we'll get more into more deeper discussions a bit later.
Absolutely, and thank you, Dr. Berkeley, for those comments, and specifically the issues faced by territories, especially when it comes to accessing areas like the COP, which I think are especially important. And I know our colleague, Mr. Ahab Downer from the Green Overseas Program, will expand on shortly. The minister was just about to join, but I don't see him, so I will go to Dr. Mohammad Nagdee from CCREEE in the meantime. And Mo, you're representing a regional perspective, obviously specifically focused on the energy transition. I mean, I really see energy as core to all of these conversations when we're looking at this. So, what was your reflection as an attendee at COP with that regional?
Thanks, James. Just confirming you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we hear you very well.
Yes, yes, we can.
Fantastic.
Yes, can do.
My reflections from COP were that the resources that were committed, I think there were some positive takeaways, as Dr. Berkeley would have mentioned, and I echo those sentiments. if I recall, it was about $1.3 trillion annually by 2035 for climate action. And then there was commitments to triple adaptation finance, operationalization of the loss and damage fund. They were all positive outputs, but even with these commitments at COP, we need to really focus on the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is really about the global finance gap, which is recognizing that the challenge is not simply about the volume of the commitments made internationally, but it's also about the resources reaching the countries that need them most, the SIDS and the LCDs. So I echo Dr. Berkeley's sentiments fully. And it's not, and even where the access is available, it's not accessible at the speed of which the climate crisis is demanding. Dr. Berkeley went on to mention that the challenges of funding commitments and then eligibility criteria are placed to even further the availability of the funding to those that are in need. So for us in the region, and for SIDS, the pathway to access is highly complex. Processes are lengthy, requirements are demanded. Administrative burdens are significant, especially for small governments with limited technical capacity. It is the reality of our region. And even when the instruments do exist, whatever they may be, the transactional costs, the data needs, and the procedural steps make them extremely, extremely difficult to really put into practice. So I congratulate Dr. Berkeley and others on the establishment of the trust fund. It's definitely the move in the right direction. And we really cannot talk about building forward better if the resources required for the reconstruction, the resilience, and the energy transition arrive slowly. And I know that Minister Samuda is going to expand on this in detail, but the Jamaica experience just a few weeks ago is extremely relevant. We need to take note of it. Jamaica lost, I believe it was almost 30% of their GDP due to Hurricane Melissa. And that shows how quickly gains can reverse. I was sitting with Liz Riley, the executive director of SEDIMA yesterday, and she placed it into a beautiful context for me. The number of houses that were lost and damaged in the hurricane in Jamaica are more houses than are in Barbados on a whole. And because we're headquartered in Barbados. And when we look at these realities, with Jamaica being a larger of the islands, we still have to realize that the vulnerabilities are there. So going back to the point for you, James, in terms of COP, yes, the commitments are there. I think that there were certain areas where we had positive ambition, which we continue to see, but the finance gap is a reality for us. What we in the region need is greater ambition, yes, but we need greater predictability, simpler, more streamlined access pathways. So when global commitments translate into financing that is accessible and ready to disperse, and the islands will be able to invest directly into those systems to protect the lives, the economies, and the long-term development. And unlocking this is really where we need to now translate those ambitions into ensuring that it's accessible and available to really do what is needed. It needs to have the impact we want it to have. And this is extremely valuable. I'm just going to mention the removal of the fossil fuels, particularly from the narratives, and I think it was a material declaration. I think that this was a bit disappointing. It is a reality of what we deal with, but I want to focus directly on financing.
Yeah.
Adaptation also occurs repeatedly in the documents, but we've actually hardly mentioned mitigation. And this is important for SIDS. Adaptation is important for SIDS because we need to be able to build stronger and we need to be able to be resilient to the impacts of hurricanes. But if we're talking about the Paris Agreement, we're talking about limiting to the 1.5 degrees Celsius, then effectively we need to have more mitigation. And I say this from the standpoint of CCREEE, who focuses on mitigation and renewable energy. But reality is that if we only focus on adaptation, what we're saying is that the cycle of the Caribbean and the smaller development states is on survival rather than on a global pathway towards achieving security and meeting the 1.5
Thank
Paris
you.
Agreement. So I just wanted to mention that. Yeah, I'll stop there. I think I went on a bit too much.
That was perfect.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Some important points there from the regional perspective. And I can see that Honourable Minister Samuda has joined us, representing the Government of Jamaica, appointed Minister of Water, Environment and Climate Change, and recently returned from COP30. And I know, Minister, it's been an incredibly difficult few weeks for Jamaica, so we really appreciate you taking the time. And I think also a critical moment for you to be attending COP30. So we welcome your reflections on attending COP30, given everything that has occurred over the last few weeks in Jamaica.
Thank you, James, and allow me to acknowledge other panelists and colleagues from around the region and from SIDS generally. COP30 was a mixed bag of success, and it came at a critical juncture, not just for Jamaica because of our recent catastrophe, but for SIDS and LDCs globally. But to contemplate the Jamaican context, you can't just look at Hurricane Melissa. I've had the oversight of the environment and climate change portfolio coming up on 4 years in February. And since my tenure would have started, Jamaica would have experienced its hottest day on record. It would have experienced its wettest day on record. It would have experienced over the last 4 years its worst drought, its third worst drought, and its fourth worst drought on record. We would have experienced 2 tropical storms, a Category 4 hurricane last year in Hurricane Beryl, and then now what could be classified as a Category 6 if the WMO is minded to take a second look at the Saffir-Simpson scale. That's climate change in reality. That's not a figment of imagination. That's not an academic debate for us at this stage. Our weather patterns have shifted, and it has exacerbated existing developmental challenges and economic challenges that all of us would face, certainly in the region, and most SIDS would face generally. And that has to be understood, that while we debate and while we take the multilateral process that is COP very seriously, while these debates rage, we continue to face the impact of that changed climate. I made the point in one of our side events during COP that sometimes because we get sucked into the discussions and we use particular buzzwords in how we present, the 1.5 to stay alive, though hanging by a thread, is sometimes not understood by those who don't operate in climate change or don't operate in a particular sphere. 1.5 wasn't a good thing. It was an equal sharing of misery. It was just an acceptance of a threshold that we thought we could achieve a level of adaptation to be able to manage. It wasn't exactly set as an ideal. It was set as this was the best we could get the rest of the world to agree to. And it gave islands like Jamaica, SIDS generally, LDCs and other middle-income countries a fighting chance. It wasn't a great situation. And that's playing out now because we're virtually at the 1.5 mark. Today, the sea is 2 degrees. Today, the Caribbean Sea is 2 degrees warmer than it was last year this time. Whether that will maintain, whether that average will hold, remains to be seen. But we are having real challenges related to the fact that our climate has changed. And I think that's the important context before I move into what COP was and what COP wasn't, James, I feel you'd allow me. So there's never been a COP where there isn't a mixed bag of success, right? There's always things that you wanted to see happen, and there's always things that you would have wanted to see go much further. You'd have wanted to see much more ambitious text. And that's the case for this one. I think I perhaps may be a little more disappointed than I am usually at the end of a COP, because seeing what Jamaica is going through, seeing what Vietnam is going through currently, seeing extreme weather events pop up all around the world over the last 10 days, you would think that the urgency and the facts staring us in the face would have brought about greater ambition. But unfortunately, the global geopolitical landscape didn't allow for us to go much further. I would not join, I'd say, some cynics that I've heard in saying that we've eroded any of our positions. I just don't think we moved as far as we should, taking into consideration everything that has happened over the last few years and everything that is happening now to people right across the globe. But there are some positives. The positives are around adaptation and its new finance targets, I think, is very important. The commitment to the 1.3 trillion is important. I think the big loss was the no fade out on no talks really on fade out of fossil fuels. But I do think the launch of the Tropical Forest Forever facility by the Brazilian government is a particularly important step. I think the steps taken by the government of Colombia in them pushing the discussions on phase out of fossil fuel kind of lay the groundwork for what could be some success in the years to come. The other thing that I'm heartened by is the progress that we've made with loss and damage and loss and damage fund in terms of agreeing to particular framework structures and agreeing to the replenishment cycle. And I'm actually, not afraid to acknowledge the administrative work that has been done by Ibrahim and his team in terms of getting that fund operationalized to the point where it will be open for submissions on December 15th. So I think there is some reason to be hopeful, James, but there is also sufficient reason for us to be critical of larger emitters of the developed world in the fact that they're not taking our lived reality as seriously as we believe they should. And I won't articulate why we believe they should. I think every COP speech does that. But generally, I think this COP would have been a mixed bag of success. And to not be parochial, but I have to, considering what Jamaica would have just gone through, I would say that Jamaica has received significant support from many of the multilateral agencies and certainly many of the pillars of climate finance generally. And we'll be making some announcements very soon in terms of funds that we've been able to mobilize for recovery efforts in a sense, but certainly for resilience building. So I think there is willingness to move Jamaica's projects through a special window or emergency response type approach to the projects, which will help us to unlock long overdue funding. So perhaps that is the silver lining. So hopefully we'll not just build back quickly, but we'll build back far better and far stronger and with resilience in mind. Thank you, James.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that overview, those comments. And I think completely agree. The mixed bag is an important takeaway. We'll come to the Minister shortly and all of our representatives here for questions. So for journalists, you'll be able to either raise your hand or submit a written question. Who's Mr. Ahab Downer from the Green Overseas Program. So Ahab, if you'd like to share your reflections.
Yes, thanks very much, James, and thank you for making this opportunity. I head up, unlike the other gentlemen on this panel, I head up a program that works specifically with a set of territories and overseas countries and territories of the European Union and the United Kingdom. The program that I head up really looks to build climate change resilience, to infuse energy transition, so as to promote moving towards a lower carbon economies for these overseas countries and territories. And in working with these overseas countries and territories, as an EU-funded program that was funded pre-Brexit, so the UK OTs are part of our network of 25 overseas countries and territories, we came to realize that in order to promote these objectives, we also need to help these overseas countries and territories access greater finance to build resilience, like the panelists have all underlined as being a key issue. We saw at COP30 indeed that some additional funds have been earmarked and promised between now and 2035. I think even with those, the amount of funds that have been earmarked, there still exists a very significant finance gap. Like the gentleman from Jamaica underlined, building resilience is key, but having to do that only in the wake of a disaster such as Jamaica has recently experienced, and thus garnering having the eyes and the ears of the world looking at Jamaica, and that allowing access to finance That's wonderful that there's been a response and that Jamaica will be able to build back stronger. But I think we all agree that it's important to build resilience in advance of disaster. And that's something that the program that I have the privilege of heading up is trying to do. And we do that by strengthening the technical capacities and skills of individuals across these 25 overseas countries and territories that we work with, and allowing them to network with one another in on-site, in-person workshops, so that they can exchange best practice approaches. Oftentimes, individuals across these territories feel they're all alone, and that they're alone in facing these challenges, when in fact there's a great many commonalities, be they UK or EU, overseas countries and territories, or small island developing states, so on and so forth. And so by creating a network and allowing exchange of ideas and best practice approaches, our program has, I think, beginning to render these our partner overseas countries and territories better prepared to meet the challenges and climate change related challenges of the future. I think the trust fund that has been established in BVI is definitely something to be lauded. It's as they underline, it's the first time in an OCT that such a fund has been created, although others across other SIDS have been created and proven to be successful and very effective. And it's that type of innovation that needs to happen, in addition to world leaders agreeing that these overseas countries and territories, small island developing states, and other vulnerable countries around the world really deserve the proper level of climate finance to help them maintain their resilience going forward. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Ahab, for those comments from the overseas territories perspective. So I now invite, if there are questions from any of the journalists that are here, to put to any of the speakers. You should see the opportunity, you should be able to raise your hand or submit a written question. If not, I'll go to one of the pre-submitted questions. Just give me a moment. So Minister Samuda, I know there was talk of I think 9.5 billion was the total amount being looked at for the need for Jamaica's recovery post Melissa, and there's been a number of innovative financing mechanisms that Jamaica fortunately had in place. I was wondering if you could comment more on the relative success of some of those for the immediate response, and how far they go towards the full amount needed towards recovery in Jamaica.
Sure, James. So the World Bank and UNDP have partnered to do a particular assessment in terms of what our infrastructure damage is. That particular figure is somewhere in the range of about 8.4 billion, I believe, that they've done as their preliminary assessment. That figure doesn't take into consideration the value of damage to our ecosystems and forests, where we've had 51% of our primary forests severely damaged. That doesn't take into consideration loss of economic activity, which we expect to be much higher. So where the figure will end up remains to be seen. It's a particularly hard pill to swallow when the Planning Institute of Jamaica yesterday would have confirmed that our quarterly growth for the quarter right before was 4.6%. And if you know Jamaica's economic history, that's a breakout of our anemic growth. So in many ways, our macroeconomic reforms were just starting to bear true fruit to have this take place. But we do expect that the economic fallout will be significant. The value of damage to our the value of our damage relative to our GDP is over 30%. Right, so it's a massive hit that we have taken. We'll allow the final assessments to determine where that ends up. We do know that we have to mobilize significant funds, perhaps in the range, as we had mentioned previously, not COP, in the range of approximately $9.5 billion to build back with a level of resilience that doesn't expose us to next year's storm or the storm after in many of our communities with very little time, because as you blink, it will be another hurricane season. Now, the situation could be worse, but Jamaica had engaged a series of steps to put ourselves in better standing to be able to manage catastrophes. The first was our catastrophe bond, which is listed, well, it was listed at $150 million US with the World Bank. We've been able to cash in on that. The other was significant increases in our parametric insurance through the regional mechanism, which is dubbed the CRIF, where we've been able to pull down approximately $90 million US. We had also started for the first time, as we were getting our debt under control, a disaster fund, where we had capitalized with about $6 million US, but it was the first time Jamaica would have had such a saving account, even to commence its own recovery efforts. But beyond that, the country had put aside approximately $6 billion US in its NIR, the highest in our history. So we don't start at zero. We don't start, totally exposed without any ability to do anything for ourselves. But the scale of the damage and the degradation of our productive capacity is enormous. You see, if you understand the lay of the land in Jamaica, 70% of our population live within 5 kilometers of the sea. So a 17-foot storm surge creates massive damage for our fisheries, for our agriculture, for your commercial districts. It's just a significant amount of damage. Now, I can't recall, I'm sure it may have happened, but I can't recall in my lifetime event that would have simultaneously wiped out a large part of our agriculture sector and damaged our tourism product in the way that it has. We expect to return with approximately 65% of our room stock open by middle December. But that's a very hard pill to swallow. The winter tourist season is where we earn majority of our foreign exchange for the year. So whereas it's not the single largest contributor to the economy, it is the single largest contributor to our foreign exchange earnings, which creates its own pressures and can create inflationary challenges. So in short, James, we did put aside some funds. We did engage, I think, innovative climate finance solutions and disaster mitigation solutions. However, the scale of the disaster relative to what we were able to put aside is obviously vastly different, and it will be a challenging couple of years ahead.
Thank you, Minister, for that overview. We had another question from journalist Ben Payton. Ben, I'm going to try and allow you to ask the question directly. You can talk.
Okay, thanks, James, and thanks to all the panelists for your interesting presentations. My question is particularly for Dr. Berkeley and for Mr. Downer. Can you explain a bit more to what extent, on balance, overseas countries and territories are at a disadvantage relative to independent countries in terms of being able to access different forms of climate finance?
Dr. Berkeley, welcome to you, Ahab. We go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Yes.
now.
Okay, good. Yes. I've sat in this chair for about a decade plus. And what I've heard at every single meeting is that because of our political status, we are excluded. I think by and large we are viewed as part of the United Kingdom, maybe an outpost of sorts, and not necessarily an independent. Obviously, we are not independent, but the challenges that we face in mitigating against these climate issues is real for us. I wish I could sit here and say that we have had the kind of attention, if you will, from the United Kingdom as we would like. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Again, hence that is why we had to do something for ourselves. So we went ahead and created the Climate Change Trust Fund, and that is being financed through an environmental levy. Each person coming into the territory pays a 10%, sorry, a $10 levy that goes into a fund. That fund is distributed across the three entities: the Climate Change Trust Fund, the Tourist Board, and the National Parks Trust, all of which deal with maintenance, preservation of some kind when it comes to the environment. The very thing that we sell is what we're trying to protect here.
Thank you, Dr. Berkeley. Ahab, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I do. Indeed, the overseas countries and territories, be they of the EU or the UK, as Dr. Berkeley pointed out, because of their political status, because of their attachment to their mother countries, UK or European, they're deemed to be too well off to access funds that other small island developing states do have access to, and yet all too often their mother countries don't provide them sufficient funding to build resilience, to mitigate and adapt properly. So they're a bit between a rock and a hard place. There's talk of amending the Paris Agreement as part of the UNFCCC and allowing these OCTs to have access to global funds such as those that are accessed by other vulnerable countries. But that's not the case today. And so for these OCTs, it's especially difficult. There's also talk of using the MVI or multivariability index to identify countries and territories that are especially vulnerable and yet don't have access to funding, so as to make it more equitable and to make funding available to those who need it most or need it equally. And then there are, of course, thankfully, very innovative approaches, such as that being used by BVI. My program is also exploring with the Falkland Islands access to blue and green funds that they're looking to sell in order to underwrite preservation of their ecosystems. So there are a number of methods by which these OCTs can be proactive, but all too often, sadly, they're left to their own devices, and they don't have proper access to climate finance such as they need to. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ahab. We have another question here from Gabrielle Jackson from The Guardian. Gabrielle, I'm going to open your microphone if you're able to go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I am Gabrielle Jackson from PBCJ, so I'm in Jamaica, not from the
Okay.
Guardian. Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
John is to Minister Samuda and to Dr. Nagdee. I know this is a topic that has been beaten to death, but what are your thoughts on mangrove regeneration as a means of combating climate change? And this is specific to Jamaica as well in light of Hurricane Melissa's passing.
So I can go first if you'd like. mangrove restoration was actually submitted as a part of our NDCs recently submitted during UN Climate Week. We're the first Caribbean nation to do so. So we've acknowledged that this is a critical mitigation tool, but also for us a critical coastal protection tool. The area of greatest concern, because that's just what the statistics and the land studies show, that we've had mangrove degradation is actually in the south central part of the island. Fortunately, the original track of Hurricane Melissa did not follow the track of going through southern Clarendon all the way into St. Ann, where I represent, but the southern Clarendon section of the island is at sea level. So you can imagine what would have happened with a 17-foot storm surge. And that's also the area where you have the greatest level of mangrove degradation. So, you know, all of the factors that could have created a massive disaster or even a worse disaster than we're experiencing now were present. So mangrove restoration for us is a critical pillar of our future protection. We've engaged with the University of the West Indies and their SODECO, US SODECO, and they are currently engaged in a project using the UK Blue Carbon Fund as funding to restore 5,000 hectares of critical mangroves along that particular corridor. We're also looking to do similar work in areas of St. Elizabeth and even southern Manchester, which we believe will significantly strengthen our coastal defenses. And why this is important and why nature-based solutions can never be ignored for economies the size of Jamaica is because an area of downtown Kingston that we recently did coastal revetment works, a kilometer of coastal revetment works cost $10 million US. Now we have 28 kilometers of Kingston and St. Andrew to do to protect a million people. Now that investment literally, it doesn't trigger new jobs, it doesn't create economic growth, it simply de-risks old investments behind. So when you have to put $280 million to the Kingston and St. Andrew capital, areas like Southern Clarendon have a long wait before you could put that sort of infrastructure into that area. So you have to depend on the natural defenses that the environment provides. So it is a major priority of ours.
Thank you. And I know, Minister, you said you represent St. Ann. I am from St. Ann, so any conversation about that parish is close to my heart. So thank you very much.
Well, I can share with you from the World Bank's assessment that St. Ann faced $520 million US of damage. But the scale of damage isn't just limited to the southwest of the island, and I think getting the public to understand that is particularly important.
Yes, and I'm taking up a lot of time, but one of the things PBCJ has tried to do is share footage from all across the island and also speak to persons who are impacted. My family is from St. Ann, so even getting in contact to my grandfather and the scale of the damage, I don't think videos do it justice. So it is heartwarming to hear that it has been considered as an option to combat climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabrielle, very much for that. And Mo, I think you had a comment on that.
Thanks, Gina. Thanks for the question. I really can't articulate it better than the minister, but yeah, mangrove regeneration represents one of the most critical evidence-based, nature-based solutions available for the Caribbean and beyond. And it's also good for sequestering greenhouse gases as well. So it's beneficial all across the gambit of what you can possibly imagine. I always remember there's a video circulated from 2024 actually showing mangroves mitigating the storm surges as it came towards the shore. I can't remember exactly which event it was from, but fundamentally there are benefits across the board from an environmental, ecological, climate adaptation and mitigation focus. And I think there must be a greater effort on us trying to regenerate and replenish mangroves as much as we can. I know within the region, because we are tourism-based economies, we have this tendency to be able to measure pristine white sand beaches as a preference to be able to garner more economic interest. But the reality is that I think we need to take note of the fact that we need to be able to preserve our mangroves as important and as much as we can, simply because of the adaptive and protective measures that they do face. And in many cases, mangroves are the first line of natural defense that we do have when we have these increased storm conditions that occur. So I think it's a relevant question. I congratulate Jamaica on the efforts being made to be able to preserve and continue to build out the mangrove ecosystems. And I think that the region on a whole can take a leaf out of your notebook to ensure that this continues to occur. So again, I can't add much more than Minister Samuda would have mentioned.
Thank you very much. And we have one more question here that I'll take from journalists. So Daphne Ewing Chow from Cayman Compass and also writer for Forbes. So Daphne, if you could go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. My question is for Minister Samuda, but really anyone else on the panel could also answer. And this would require a really frank and honest answer. I know every year we come back from COP, and I think the overwhelming sentiment is frustration, especially among small island developing states. And I was just wondering whether we really think here that COP is working for us, whether it's relevant anymore in the face of all of this public skepticism around the framework.
Good question. Minister, your honest thoughts on that one?
I honestly understand the frustration that colleagues feel. I understand the skepticism that those who look on feel when examining, both statements made and the fact that many commitments remain just as commitments with no action behind it. I think that is the greater sense of frustration. If we had no new text going forward, but persons honored what had been committed in the past, we'd be in a much better place today than we've been in the past. So I understand the line of questioning, and yes, I am frustrated, as I would think every other colleague from the developing world is frustrated. But we need multilateralism to work. We don't have the luxury of picking up our marbles and stepping away. So the issue of relevance for us is that it has to be relevant, and we have to work through it to keep it relevant, because it is through the multilateral system that we have a seat at the table where at least you have an equal voice, even if you don't have equal pull on the final result. And I think that has to be understood, that yes, it's a flawed process, but it is a process that we have, and we don't have the luxury of stepping away. Unfortunately, I do sense a creeping frustration and growing skepticism because of the pace at which we are resolving some of the issues, and the current geopolitical instability certainly doesn't lend itself to the focus on the subject of climate change that we desperately need. So yes, there is frustration, there is skepticism, but we don't have another route to resolving these issues, to mobilizing the sort of finance that we have. And we don't have the luxury of not trying. I mean, we've only, in the Caribbean, been able to attract, I think, 4.4% of GCF's project deployment, when we are one of the most vulnerable regions in the world. We go through catastrophe after catastrophe after catastrophe, made worse by climate change, and all climate attribution studies show. So yes, we're frustrated, but no, we don't have the luxury of walking away, and we do have a commitment to doing our best to make it more relevant in the near future.
Thank you, Minister. I'll just go to other representatives for final comments. And Dr. Berkeley, I know that you might have to leave in a second, so I can go to you for any quick comment before you drop off.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me very quickly say that a minute or two ago, the minister's private secretary postponed the meeting, so I can hang around until the end. The meeting is now at 1 o'clock. All right. I think my closing remark, I think that's what you asked for, is I echoed some of what Minister Samuda said, and certainly Dr. Nagdee. I like very much a comment on mangroves. That has really been an issue for us. There's a practice here in the territory. I'm not sure if it exists elsewhere across the region. There's a lot of reclamation, right? And a lot of reclamation, and it's inevitably the damage, significant portions of mangroves. And so as we sit in this ministry, there's this delicate balance. How do we find that balance between allowing some development, but still preserving, as I mentioned earlier, the very thing that we are selling, trying to preserve that, and not try to stifle development too much. And that is something that we're working out internally. But I think the whole idea of mangroves, and we're even now thinking about a serious mangrove replantation a project where we're thinking about holding those who are responsible for causing the damage, if you will, to finance coral projects, to finance mangrove projects. And not just a one-off thing. It's a sort of a revolving fund, if you will. Because again, whilst we try to preserve and protect the environment, the very thing that we sell in, we still need to find some way to balance that with some measure of development to some degree. I'm not sure if that exists across the region, but that is something that we are challenged with here. But as we push forward, I'm sure other innovative means of financing climate change, will come to the fore. Ours literally came out of necessity. Whilst we are, and I hear the minister. He categorized his as a 6. We like to think that ours was a 7. But based on the sort of damage that I have been made aware of, that's out there that happened in Jamaica, I don't know. Maybe might want to look at that 6 again, because this is the reality. This is all lived experience, and if the greater world can only understand. It's not all emotion. We live this on a daily basis. So I appreciate again this opportunity to get the word out what we are doing locally. And if anyone across the region wishes to reach out and maybe want to model something similar to what we are doing, we're very much open to having those discussions.
Thank you, Dr. Berkeley. Ahab Downer from Green Overseas, final comments.
Yeah, thank you, James. I guess just hearing reactions from my fellow panelists, I would agree that the nature-based solutions are absolutely a priority, and mangroves are one of the most effective methods, as are rebuilding coral reefs and revegetating watersheds and the like. But with regard to COP and UNFCCC, I think what I and my colleagues and our OCT partners would like to see is UNFCCC looking to find methods by which these OCTs can access the finance they need going forward. Recently, we heard that the COP31 will not occur in Sydney and won't occur in the Pacific. My program works with New Caledonia, French Polynesia, Wallis and Futuna, and Pitcairn. All these territories are experiencing a lot of climate change related threats, and we're very keen to have something the COP occurring in their region where they could really have a voice, and we join them in thinking that this is great for Turkey, but it's unfortunate for the Pacific Basin, which is experiencing a great many threats. And so I hope that this will be taken into account in future COPs. And just like to thank Island Innovation and my fellow panelists for this opportunity to exchange with you all. So thank you.
Thank you, Ahab. Dr. Nagdee, final comment.
Thanks, James. On the point of Daphne Owenshaw's question and Minister Samuda's response, when we're talking about multilateralism, you have over 196 countries or so in the room. It's never going to be an accelerated process, as you can imagine. The geopolitics and are obviously there. I don't want to say manage expectations, but I fully agree with the minister that we have to be in the room because the decisions that are being made have implications towards us, and we have to be able to represent. So we may be a bit disappointed. I think all of us across the board said that there's usually a mixed bag that comes up when you're coming out to COP. But progress is progress nevertheless. It may not necessarily be occurring at the rate that we want it to occur. But the reality is that we are seeing strong progress, and we have to continue to represent. We have to continue to be present. We have to be able to advocate. And I just want to put that into context, and that the representation from the region, from the SIDS on both sides is extremely strong, from the OCT territories as well. And we continue to advocate and not necessarily disappoint, but we take our victories and our successes, however and where we can, and we continue to then resettle. And we go again so that we can see progress go where it needs to go. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. And Minister Samuda will give you the final word before we wrap up.
I'll just firstly thanking you, James, and your team. The focus that this issue requires is definitely paramount at this time. The issues we face will require multilateral cooperation. There's no way around. Is it easy? No. Is it slow? Unfortunately, way too slow. But we do have to keep at it. The challenges we face will only get worse. And the reality is we are seeing, I don't know when scientists will assess that we have passed the 1.5 mark, or we've already passed a particular tipping point. But I fear that we're dangerously close. And with that in mind, we do have to redouble our efforts to get some common ground and to mobilize against the commitments previously made.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll wrap up. We'll be sending a recording out of this session and some notes to the journalists who attended and a number who have requested follow-up information. And so we'll continue with the Island Voices at COP platform from Island Innovation to advocate for SIDS, subnational regions and territories, and other islands, and to make sure that there is an island representation at COP to highlight all of the issues that have been discussed today. So thank you all. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll be in touch. Bye-bye.
Thanks.